As I mentioned, we're going to add a few things. We're going to add a couple ways to reset the game. We'll add a little UI to track the items that we've collected and our player lives. And we'll add a game manager to track those across levels. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to go over, there are like built-in versions of this in GameMaker. I'm going to make my own variables for this just because it's a good thing to kind of cover. But you will see some of this stuff appear when you're looking through the variables. So just something to kind of mention. And you can use those built-in variables, but I want to show how we would do it if we're doing it on our own. So a lot of the code we're going to add into the player script for the sort of logic of how the game will work. But we're also going to add a game manager to keep track of, our lives and our points and stuff like that. So let's add the game reset option real quick, and then we'll start with the game manager. So I'm going to open up my player character. And there's different ways to do this. I'm going to do this in a sort of simple way where I'm just going to reset based on if I go below a certain point. And this is going to work for a couple different scenarios. One is if I go off to the right or the left of the screen, if there's no platforms, eventually I'll just fall off into the, gravity will pull me down and I'll go past a certain point. And if I miss a platform, that will happen as well. So let's see, where do I have this set up? Oh, I think I have this set up in, I have this set up in the cactus, actually. So yeah, in the cactus, if I hit a cactus, I restart the room and I change the variable. So I'm just gonna put this into my player code to start. So let's see. I'll put this after my movement. So basically what I want to know is if a variable y, which represents the y position of the player, so if this y variable is greater than, and this obviously is going to depend on your game window, but let's just say like 300, just because we know the game window is not bigger than 300. So if our variable is greater than 300, we're going to reset this room. So let's find our room section. Just look for rooms. And we'll just restart the room. So let's run that and make sure that works. So now if I jump off the platform, I'll reset the room. And so this way we have a way of resetting the room. And if I go off to the left, eventually I will, you could put like some platforms there to block the player from going off to the left. That might look better. It's kind of up to you about how you want to achieve that. But I'm just going to use the same thing to fix that. Okay, so that fixes that little bit. But now let's actually show when we're like collecting items and doing other things like that. So we have these items that we can collect. I'm using like apples and carrots. And obviously you can use whatever art you want to represent different things. Since I already have these in here, I'm just going to use the apple to be my items that I'm collecting, and I'll use the carrot to represent my lives. And so we can build a little UI system based on these items, and then we can track this across levels, and if we lose the game, we can reset these. So we'll set up some game logic in a game manager that it will put into all of our different scenes. So the game manager doesn't have art associated with it, but it has a position in the scene, and we can use it to draw our UI. You don't have to do it that way, but that's just the way I'm going to do it to keep it simple. So I'm going to make a new object. I'm going to call this obj_game_manager. And this will just have sort of the basic game logic in it. And I can drag this into the scene. So you still have to add this in the scene somewhere. And I'm going to put this up here in the upper right corner. And that's also going to be the starting point for my UI. So you can it's kind of small, but you can see this little question mark right here is kind of the origin point of my game manager. So in the game manager, one thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to click and set this to persistent. So that means it's just going to be the same throughout all the levels that it exists in. So we can add it into our other levels and it'll still be there. And so now we're going to do some scripting. So in my game manager, I'm going to start with an event. So with our objects, we often start with a create event, which starts when the scene starts. But for a couple of our values, we want to track them across levels. So we don't want to set them when the level starts, because that, if we restart a level or we go to a new level, that'll reset these values. So instead, we're going to go to other, and we're going to go to game start. So this is an event that occurs when the entire game starts. We're just going to initialize our variables here. So I'm going to create a variable, and in order to make this variable exist across the whole game, I'm going to use the global namespace. So you can see this is global here, and I can just attach a value to the global namespace by just hitting a dot. And I'm gonna do, for my apples, I'm just gonna say apple underscore count. And so when I start the game, my apple count will be 0. That's gonna be kind of my points, basically. So you could use points. In the game, it has a built-in score value. So you could just use that. But I wanna use my own value, so I'm gonna say global.apple count. And I'll put a comment here that says, apple count is score. And then my carrot count is lives. So I'm using these roughly equivalently, and I just want to show that it can really be whatever you want it to be. So then I'm also going to have global.carrot count. But this will be like the lives I have in the game, and I'm going to start this as 3. So when I start the game, I'll have 3 lives. If I lose all 3 lives, I'll have to go back to the very beginning. And these are all kind of rough. We don't have time to like really make sure everything is super clean, but we're just going to use this as a rough starting point. All right, so that's our starting point, game start. So now we'll add an event to draw our UI. So the step is for the physics in our game. That's why we use it to script the player. But the draw is when we are drawing the graphics. And so we want to draw our GUI. That's our graphical user interface. And so this is a separate system where we draw sprites on top of the room. There's different ways to do this, but this is kind of the simple way to do it. So in my draw GUI event, I just want to display the score. So to do this, I can look under UI or GUI or draw. Yeah, draw. So this big T will let me draw a variable to the screen. And then I can also draw sprites. So let's draw our variables first. So I'm going to start with the apple count. And you can set this relative to the position of our GUI. So I'm going to set it relative. And I'll probably move it over in a moment, but I'm just going to start there. And then I'm going to do another one and draw the global.carrot count. And I'm going to move this over a little bit, so I'll set X to like 32. And these will both be relative to the GUI, the game manager position. So let's run and see if we can see those. So you see that 0 here and the 3 here. That's just a built-in font. If we want, we can change all of that stuff, but I'm just going to leave it. But I am going to change the color. So you can set the font of your text. You can use all these blocks to set different things. But I'm just going to set the draw color. The white actually is pretty decent. But just so you know, you can set this color. I want to show this. So if I want it to be like hot pink, I can set that there. And that's going to change the draw color. That's actually harder to read, so that's not a good option. Maybe I'd set it to black. Depending on the style of your game, different values will look better there. But I think for my current game, I think white is actually the best one. So I'm going to leave that as white. But then the numbers by themselves don't really tell us much. So you could write what they are, but that's not that exciting. I think what I want to do instead is draw sprites to represent each one of these values. So I'm going to use the draw sprite. And I'll put one before the apples. And then I'll put another one before the carrots. And so I'm going to draw the sprite. I'll choose the apple. Oops. I'll choose the apple, and this is going to be relative. And then I'll move the apple text over a little bit. I'll move that to 16. And then for our carrot sprite, I'll draw the carrot. And I want to move this one over because each one I want to be next to each other. So you can change the X and Y, but depending on what you want your layout to look like, you can move them up and down or left and right. So I'll move the carrot to 32. And then the carrot count, I'll move to 48. I'm probably going to have to change these, but let's just see what that looks like. Okay, yeah, so I have to move these over. So it's more like 32. So I'll do the apple count as 32. This carrot is 64. And then 64 plus 32 is 96. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so it's a little goofy, but you get the basic idea. And I can move this guy over. I think this could be like over here. Okay, that's too far. Let's move it back here. But you can put the UI, wherever you want. But so that shows us, our lives and our apples. But it's not going to change because we haven't coded anything to make it change. So we need to add scripts to our objects to change that variable. So let's start with the carrot. Or no, let's start with the apple. So I'll go to object apple. And it has a step event. And when the player interacts with the apple, we get rid of the apple. But now what we also want to do is we want to increase our apple count. So before we destroy, I'm going to drag a variable over here. And I'm going to look for the apple count. So we get global.appleCount. I'm just going to add 1. Okay, so that's really all we have to do to track the apple count. So now you can see the UI reacts when I get one of those apples. So let's do the same thing for our carrot. So I'll go to the carrot. And for this one, we're going to make a slight change here because we don't want to get more lives than 3. So we'll kind of have like a limit to how many lives you can get. This has more complicated code because it plays an animation. But it's basically the same idea. It changes the carrot animation to is collected. And then eventually it destroys the instance. So here we're going to do the same thing, but we're not able to go past 3. So I can put this variable in here and set the carrot count here. And again, we can add 1, make it relative, but we can add a check in here. So I'm going to look for an if block. And I'll drag this above here. Or actually, let's put this here. And I'll put the assign variable in the if block. So we'll say if global dot apple count is less than 3. So we can't collect more lives if we've already got 3 lives. You don't have to do it this way. This is just kind of like a common thing where your max lives is 3 lives. Oh, it doesn't work. Let's see what we got wrong. Okay. If you're, I put the wrong one in. So this should be the carrot count. Okay. So if your carrot count is less than 3, then you don't get to collect a life. But if we die, we want to subtract a carrot. And then we will be able to gain the life back. Okay, so if we die, that happens in a couple different places. So right now, if we can die if we hit the cactus. So if we look, we have this If we hit the cactus here, we'll die. But we can also die if we hit this moving enemy over here. Which is, let's see, where is this? Down here. And then we can also die in our player script if we fall off the bottom of the page. So that's all the way down here. Or no, it's right here. So what we want to do here is, instead of like having to write this code in a bunch of different places, what we can do is we can make a function that we can call to do the same thing in each case. So you can put that function wherever you want. I'm going to put it on the player since it affects the player, but you could put it wherever you like. So in my create object for the player, I'm also going to create a function, not just a variable. So I'm going to go to the player, and in here there's a function block. So you can create a function by declaring a new function, and then you can also call a function. So I'm going to create a new function called player dies. And in this function, I'm just going to copy this restart room code. So I'm going to copy that and paste it here. But I also want to subtract one of my lives. So I'm going to grab this variable, and I'm going to say global dot caret count, which is my lives, and we're going to say -1 relative. So now anywhere that we want to have the player die, we can call this function. So this is a good way to reuse parts of our code rather than having to write everything multiple times. So right now it's very simple. We might add some more logic in a moment. But let's go back to our player step. And so now if we go below the screen, which is what we see here, I'll put a comment here. So player falls out of game window. So instead of restarting the room, I'm going to close this. And what we're going to do is we're going to call that function block that we just created. So I'm going to say function call. And then the tricky part here is the function gets created as part of the player. But unlike the variable, we can't just use the function call. Like if I say player dies, this does come up, but it's not going to work. We're going to get an error. So this is something that you may run into. I'm just going to show this real quick. I get this error because it doesn't understand where this function is. So I can do this with variables, but I can't do this with functions. So what I need to do is say who is calling this function. Since I'm in the player, I can just say self.player dies. Self is a variable that refers to the object that we're in. Or I can say object player.player dies. And that's what I would need to call on other functions. So now if I die, I'm getting a different error. Maybe I need to say self here. No, okay. Never mind. I'm getting some other error that I didn't anticipate. Okay, it says I'm setting a variable before I'm reading it. That's sort of weird because I am creating this global apple count variable here. So that should be fine. Or caret count. I'm going to disable this and just make sure that's what the issue is. No, that's not even the issue. Okay. Okay, this is an error that I was not getting before, so... Okay, let's see if I can call it from somewhere else. Let's just make sure I'm doing this right. Self dot player dies. Oh, there we go. Okay. So now you can see when I jump off the platform, my carrot count goes down. But if I hit the cactus, the carrot count stays the same. So we need to call this function from our other events. So we can go to our cactus, and here where we have this set up, we can replace this with our function call. So I'll call this new function, and here I need to reference the player because we're not inside the player anymore. So we have to say object underscore player, and then player dies. So now if I hit this cactus, I should die. So my carrot count should go down, and then if I get a carrot, it goes back up. And that cactus, again, resets me, but it doesn't set the variable. So we'll go to our moving enemy, and I'll do this here. And the nice thing about this is now if I ever change what happens when the player dies, I don't have to go back to each one of these objects. I just have to change this function because they all call the same function. So I'm going to get my player and call player dies. All right, so now my moving cactus will do the same thing. Okay, so now the next thing we can do is add some logic in here. So we can say if the player dies, so now I can go back to my player, and inside my create, I can say if the player dies, we can check to see if we have 0 carrots. And if we do, just to show sort of like, you know, that state, we can set our apple count back to 0. So we can lose all of our points. So we'll put a new if in here. And we'll say if global dot carrot count is equal to 0, then we're going to set global dot apple count to 0. So we kind of like lose the game, we lose all our points. And then instead of restarting the room, because this could happen in multiple rooms, what I'll do is I'll set a room specifically to the start room. So I'll go to room, and we'll choose room 1. So even if I've made it to room 2, we'll go back to room 1. So that'll also kind of indicate that we lost the game. So now I'm going to collect a couple apples. I'm going to hopefully make it to the end. I'll go to my second room. So my apples are still here. My lives are still here. But if I die in this room, so if I get hit by this cactus, so we can see my lives are 2. And if I die again, it's 3. And if I walk off the side of the window, uh-oh. Okay, so that didn't quite work. So let's see what we got wrong. Okay. Oh, you know what we should say? If global.carrot count is less than 1. I think that is what we want. And then we also actually need to reset the carrot count back to 3 because we're starting over. So let's set carrot count back to 3. And go to room 1. Okay. All right, hopefully that'll work. Let's try that again. Aye. Okay. can barely get past that guy. I'm just gonna go off the side. Okay, so it is resetting here, but it's not taking me back to room 1. I wonder why. That's weird. Let's take a look at my rooms for a second. So this is happening, but it's not taking me back to room 1. That's weird. I don't really know why. Oh, this is why, because I'm going here, but then I'm also restarting the room. So I need an else here. Because I'm still going back, I'm still going to restart room at the bottom. So we need this restart room to go in else. All right, let's try that. Hey. Okay. Let's see if I can get... Nope. Hey. Oh boy. Okay. So now let's see if that works. Okay, there we go. So now I reset to the beginning of the game. So again, this is pretty basic. Like, it doesn't go to like a you lose screen or anything like that. You could set stuff like that up if you wanted to. But just to keep things simple, we're just going to reset the game. And so yeah, that's basically it. Now we have this script where we can reset the player, and then we can also check the game state, so we can see, you know, if we've lost all our lives, or in this case our carrots, we can reset to the beginning of the game. If not, we can just restart the room, and then we can also count apples as kind of our score. So yeah, I don't really have any apples or lives in the second room. That's where I would start to like add more stuff in here to make it a little more interesting. But for the demo's sake, I'm just going to stop there, and we'll do some more workshop time. Yeah, I'm going to stop here.